Hey cats, Ed the running shoe guy Bud here, back once again like the midsole master with an initial review of the ASICS GEL Cumulus 24. Let's get into it. YouTube family, thanks for tuning in. It's always appreciated. If you're yet to do so, help the channel out by hitting that subscribe button, but also clicking the bell below for notifications so you're notified. Also give this video a thumbs up, like, and share it with your running buddies. Danke schön. Today, an initial review of the ASICS GEL Cumulus 24. This is a shoe that ASICS have fired over to me for testing, and at that I'm very appreciative. Though they're not vetting my review or viewing it before my valued viewers. That makes sense, right? This space age looking beast clocks in at 321 grams in my UK size 11, so that's 11.3 ounces for the US 12. They're the same size, yeah? I think the typical sample size for the UK 8.5 is about 286 grams, 10.1 ounces. We have an 8mm drop here. Always reminds me of a kid's party. There's a retail price of 130 Earth credits on this one here in the UK. So where does the GEL Cumulus 24 fit in terms of the Nova Blast and the Nimbus 24? We will start the review with the upper first. So certainly a thicker mesh here in the Cumulus 24 than the Nova Blast, and the profile here matches more the Nimbus 24 I tested out earlier this year. A very plush and supportive heel here in the shoe. There's a booty style sort of gusseted tongue here within the shoe, and it makes for a more fitting and traditional ride than we get in a lot of models these days. There's not really any bells or whistles here. ASICS treating this very much as a typical running shoe. You do get this overlay here with the ASICS logo, but that's about it. And a couple of reflective strips back in the heel. On foot and on my initial runs, a very pleasurable plush surprise. Though it does feel quite present on the top of the foot, I did find myself uncinching the laces quite a bit, just opening them up. And I did find the laces were a touch short, especially if you're going to use a runner's knot, so beware. I think if you grab this shoe, you'll find it very, very similar if you like the Nimbus 24. Perhaps you could use it as a training partner. The uppers are very close. Just a little bit weight relieved, I suppose, in the Nimbus 24, especially that sort of fly knit style tongue. You know, this one here. Look at that. You know, side by side, there are a lot of similarities here. I did find this quite a bit of upper here. Some people may find it a little bit too much, especially if they're running in a much warmer climate. There just may be a little bit too much of it there for some runners. That could hit the versatility a little bit and the sort of varied use case of this shoe. I think people might go for something that's a little bit lighter on foot, perhaps in the upper department for those faster days. I can see that heel area and the tongue being a sort of sweat magnet to some degree. As such, I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 3 after my initial runs for the upper. I suggest the shoe is probably true to size really in terms of the ASICS typical traditional shoe sizing. Midsole now. Midsole rise, the ride here in the Cumulus 24 is very different to the Nova Blast. We're using that same flight foam blast material here in the midsole, but I think this one's much more stable underfoot. I have noted that a few people have brought the Nova Blast and just found it a little bit too unstable and wobbly. If that is the case, I think this shoe could be for you instead. Of course, it isn't just flight foam blast here in the midsole. We also have some of that classics ASICS gel, and I do believe that this top section here may be standard flight foam. It does feel a little bit firmer there, like the Weetabix before you pour on the milk. Having those two elements back there in the heel does make for a very stabilised ride. It's very controlled. It's sort of like a guided sensation there. You don't get quite the same feel in the Nimbus 24. That one's very soft compared to this shoe. It's actually easier to see the differences between the materials in the midsole on the medial side of the shoe. This bit certainly seems a little bit firmer. I'd suggest it's a much more controlled application of flight foam blast here in the shoe. I guess you could suggest that there's a dual density midsole going on here. It's nothing like the Pegasus Turbo though. You've kind of got the foams reversed almost, certainly in the heel. I think that this shoe is much more aimed at daily miles. I'm not sure many people would want to run any faster pace reps in this one. But that said, it's a clear 20 grams lighter than something like the Invincible Run. Though I think many people will notice the difference in weight between this shoe and something like the Adios 6. I think it's about 35 grams difference. It's a midsole ready for those easier paces rather than like your 5 or 10k reps. ASICS do provide an Ortholite insole within this one, and just underneath that you've got a very thin layer of another very soft foam, so there's a very comfortable underfoot feel here. I think it could be fantastic for runners looking for a very capable long run shoe, perhaps more in the vein of the Reebok Energy X or perhaps the Nike Air Zoom Vomero 16. ASICS do suggest that there is gel in the forefoot section of the shoe as well. I haven't really felt that at all. I don't know where it's positioned. Does even mention it on the outsole there. Certainly a nice smooth ride, which is amplified by the Flight Foam Blast midsole material. It's only that material on the mid to forefoot, and you can feel that responsive squash. Certainly feels very controlled to me, around about 8 minutes per mile pace or 5 minutes per kilometre. I think there's a very interesting use of ASICS materials here in the midsole, and I think it could be a fantastic tool for those looking for a little bit of stability assistance, especially if you're a heel striker, which, let's face it, many people are. I think if you found the Nova Blast a little bit too unstable, perhaps undefined, I suppose, this is probably the shoe for you. It's going to work a lot better. I'll give this one a 2.5 out of 3 for the midsole after my initial runs. Outsole now. We have the typical application of ASICS high abrasion rubber plus here, though only in the heel section of the shoe as per the Nimbus 24. In fact, the outsole layout is pretty much exactly per that shoe. Aside from a section here in the medial arch, it's pretty much the same. I think ASICS Light makes up the rest of the outsole rubber here, and if the Nimbus 24 is anything to go by, I think that the rubber will long outlast the midsole material itself. I think that's probably the case on pretty much any running shoe really, especially these days. So I pretty much expect the same outsole durability here as per the Nimbus 24. Grip was very assured on my initial runs, even in wet weather. I think that's mainly due to the pretty much full coverage rubber that we have on the outsole of this one. Very little to dislike here, and there aren't too many nooks and crannies for the dirt and debris to hide away in, like some sort of sole stowaway. I'll give it a 2.8 out of 3 for the outsole after my initial sautés. I think for purpose it's going to outlast the foam by a long way. Value now. So value, 130 Earth credits here for this one. I think the versatility is perhaps a little bit more reduced due to the weight. Doesn't feel quite as snappy to me as the Nova Blast did, certainly on faster runs. I think that's mainly down to that more plush upper. There is quite a lot of padding here in the heel, and not everybody's going to want that. I think you've got cheaper daily options perhaps if that's your sort of thing, like the Pegasus 39 for example, is a little firmer and has a bit more response than the Cumulus 24. I think this one's more of a competitor for saying like the Nike Vomero 16. But both have a similar feel on foot. I think it'll make a great training partner for the Nimbus 24 if that's perhaps your race or long distance shoe. This one could be a great one for getting the same feel on foot, but at a slightly cheaper price and with a little bit more durability perhaps. It's not quite as soft and squashy and compressive as the Nimbus 24. Something for those easier sessions where comfort and underfoot feel are required, when you want the maximum impact protection from the different technologies offered from this ASICS shoe. Quality here is also on point as always with ASICS offerings. Pretty much every one I've tested out recently, I've taken it out of the box and thought, yeah, it feels like this one's been put together with some care and attention. So just limited a little bit, I think, this one by versatility, but a really spot on smooth cruiser. I'll give it a 2.6 out of 3 for value after my initial runs. So if I've totaled the scores up correctly, which I do most of the time, that gives us 10.4 out of 12 for the ASICS Gel Cumulus 24. Will you be picking this one up? Have I spiked your interest? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. A musical interlude for you. Alright, I'm a really big Elvis fan, and I went to see the new Elvis motion picture that's been released recently in the cinemas. I kind of came away with it kind of liking it but not liking it. I'm not going to spoil the whole sequence of events that occurs. I think everybody knows kind of what happens really. I was just really bewildered by the fact that they didn't really include that much Elvis music in the film. It was a bit odd. You had all these tracks, like new versions of tracks, that are famous or famously performed by Elvis by new artists, and it just kind of felt a little odd at times, a little bit jarring, especially some scenes where they're set in the 50s or whatever and you've got this very modern music playing in the background. It just really sort of spoilt the atmosphere for me. It got me thinking about what songs should have been in the film, you know, what are some of the famous Elvis tracks. I mean, the introduction to Hound Dog, for example, with those machine gun-like snare drums. Why wasn't that there? That's like a trademark Elvis sort of tune that people love. It's really like a landmark track. There's some beautiful songs from the Blue Hawaii album as well. Why weren't they included here? That showed a very different style for Elvis. There wasn't even any room for Wooden Heart. You know, a beautiful, sincere song. It seemed sort of stuck on this whole Suspicious Minds thing, rather than featuring some beautiful stuff like The Wander of You. There wasn't really an opportunity to show the wonderful musicianship that was shown in Elvis's band that backed him in Vegas. So I think if you want to go and hear some Elvis music, go back to that sort of greatest hits that was released. I think they've put out an expanded edition of that now, and go and enjoy that. It just missed the mark for me a little bit, the Elvis film, in terms of the actual music. Go and watch it yourselves and see what you think, guys. Thanks for tuning in, always appreciated, people. We've hit 29,000 subscribers. Help us to get towards 30k by hitting that subscribe button, but also clicking the bell below for notifications. Give this video a thumbs up, like, and share it with your running buddies. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you